Hey, so it's August 10th. I'll be reading from chapter 13 of my book, The Phoenix and the Falcon. It's a dark historical romance set in the time of the Attila the Hun. And as you know, it's involving a woman who's been caught up in the maelstrom of having to be with Huns. And she has a savior of sorts in the guise of an Ostrogoth who is, his name is Valamir. So if you've been following along, she's had suffered a deep tragedy, and she's realized that her grandfather that dies when she's young and marooned her in this village, an unlikely place why she's there, had powers. You know, he was a good guy, but he also had this, dark side that he kept in check. But in the end, he used it to what he thought to protect her. In her mind, she thinks that perhaps this curse he put on the village, Kansvar village, where she was, might have led to its destruction. But, who knows? Anyway, chapter 13. And she's had a lot of trauma. She was beat up pretty badly. So she does sleep. And her son was killed horribly, which I didn't want to do, but it is how it went down. Helena slept deeply, without dreams. When she awoke with a start, her back was stiff and her legs were sore from riding, yet her head was clear. As she sat up, her hands smoothed back her hair. She did not even remember being carried inside the tent. The sun had only begun to brighten the tent. Valamir was already busy. He was preoccupied, but she had come to realize that he often withdrew into his own thoughts and concerns. She watched him repack the 2 leather bowls and cooking pot. Her stomach growled hungrily. He looked up at her and smiled. The pale sunlight shimmered on his long blonde hair, and the brilliance of his blue eyes, so alive, caught her unawares. Her cheeks grew hot. Feeling a rush of shame, she turned quickly, hoping the shadows would hide her blush. "You slept like the dead last night," he said. Her bitterness was immediate, almost reflexive. "I live." My words were unfortunate. Sometimes victory is surviving to fight another day. What difference does it make? Who misses Mikhail but me? Do the birds stop their song? Does the earth notice one less boy? I think not. We fade with the wind. It all matters. And in some way, did you ever think that I would have liked to have known your son? Children give me hope. Despite what Bebian says, at home, I've seen him roll on the ground, playing with the boys. Cratchman would have been in his glory with a young charge. If you had died that day, I would have thought of you for years, regretting that I hadn't saved you. It's time to stop feeling sorry for yourself. It changes nothing. You're alive. That's enough. She whispered, "How can you be with the Huns?" As he put his arms around her, she buried her face in his chest. She cried, clinging to him as if he were a raft in the turbulent sea. He stroked her hair, softly soothing her. After she had quieted, he was brisk. "Now, I must see to your hand. It needs a fresh bandage." With a light touch, he examined it. "The swelling is less. Can you move any of your fingers?" She wiggled her thumb, but nothing else. As if it were a new toy, he held up a piece of wood delicately carved. "Kratapan whittled a splint for you." As additional evidence of the Persian's kindness, Lena bit her lip. Not knowing what to say, she watched Valamir as he tended her hand, rebandaging it with clean cloths tied securely around the smooth piece of wood. Her voice was low. "You've both been good to me." "I've my reasons," he said, kissing her mouth and pressing her back to the sleeping mat. As his hand stroked her body, she was excited, but in an unfamiliar way. Yet she stiffened against him, feeling trapped and afraid. He whispered into her ear, "I dream of you when I sleep." She turned to him, searching for the truth in his eyes. When he kissed her again, she yielded to his embrace. "Valamir!" Kratchman called. "It's time to break camp." By Kutis, Valamir softly swore his breath, invoking the name of one of the lesser-known deities of Mithraism. "See to something, Kratchman." I'll be out in a moment, he called. Cupping her face in his hands, he whispered, if I stay any longer, I'll forget my promise. He pulled away slowly, as if each movement hurt. Tonight, we see Attila. I don't want to. He laughed. I can't hide you, Helena. Give me back one of my daggers. I'd feel safer. I'll protect you. Besides, anyone would be able to take it from you. You could teach me how to keep it. He smiled. I would teach you many things if you'd only let me. She dropped her eyes. You embarrass me. He chuckled. Then his voice became serious and solemn. I require your promise that you would only use it for defense. I gave you my word. He rummaged through a leather bag and extracted both knives, examining them with a professional eye. The dagger is fine. How did you keep it from Kansbar? I hid it. You kept little else, except a few gold coins and a knife only good for cutting meat. I saved what I could. I regretted losing my mother's ring and my grandfather's sword. The rest didn't matter. This ring? He held up his hand, still wearing it on his little fifth finger. The one he gave his whore? Yes. I'll ask Attila for it. He'll not care about a plain gold ring. The sword will be harder, but we'll see. Taking the ring off, he held it to the light. There's an inscription inside. It's in Greek, she said. I can't read, Helena, can you? It says, with all my love. He smiled, his eyes twinkling as he put it back on. I'll take your word. As he went out to join Karatapan, he laughed, holding both knives in one hand. She felt cheated, and she suspected that he could read after all. He'd also extracted her promise about the dagger, then walked out and left her with nothing. Her anger was empty and hollow beside the deep pool of her loss. Finished with her preparations for the journey, she waited with her arms around her knees, trying to keep warm. The night had brought frost, but Valamir had allowed the fire to die so they could dismantle the tent. Shivering, she regretted her impulsive gesture to Ariana, but then felt guilty. Ariana had deserved much better than a thin, worn coat. Valamir returned. You're freezing. You told me you would give me back my knives. He raised one eyebrow and then chuckled. You keep me to my side of the bargain, then? Yes, or I'll take back my word. Amused, he smiled. I gave them to Gratapan to sharpen for you. She felt foolish. Oh. See? You don't trust me. It's hard for me. His face softened for an instant. No harm done. The camp stirs. I want my tent down. It's cold. We'll have to find you a blanket or something to wear. Feeling uncomfortable and unsure of herself, she followed him. Gratapan was cooking meat over fire. Her nose twitched at the agreeable aroma. Both men looked intensely pleased with themselves. She felt annoyed at being left out of their secret. Why are you both so happy? She snapped. Look behind you, Valamir said. She turned quickly. A leather coat was fastened to one side of the tent. It was her size, made of soft brown skins with fur lining in its hood. Her voice was hushed as she touched it. It's beautiful. How did you? Valamir's voice was gruff. Karatapan. He saw to all the details, but not in one night. We had 3 women working on it. Your other coat was no protection against the wind, Karatapan said in a rush. Valamir encouraged her. Go on, put it on. As she slipped it on, Helena felt overwhelmed. It's warm. She stroked the material. No one has been so kind to me since my grandfather died. Valamir would not meet her eyes. Well, it's no more than you deserve. Karatapan rubbed his hands together, looking pleased, but his tone was brisk. Time to eat. We don't have all morning. We should take down the tent first, Valamir said. Not on an empty stomach. Valamir grumbled about servants who thought they knew everything, but acquiesced. As Helena caught his eye, they both laughed like children whose overly indulgent nurse had pretended to reprimand them. Karatapan would have none of it. Just as long as both of you eat. They laughed even harder, his tone striking them as inordinately humorless. Theudemir's voice was like a bucket of cold water. What's so funny? Valamir and Helena stopped for a second, then burst into laughter again. I'm no joke, Theudemir said, more with a touch of petulance. It's Karatapan. Valamir said. He orders us around like an old mother hen. Oh, that's nothing new. He's been doing that for years. Do you want something to eat? Karatapan asked. It looks good, he said, sitting down. They shared the meal together. Helena and Valamir were careful not to catch each other's eyes. When they had finished, the 3 men took down Valamir's and Karatapan's tents. They worked easily together with the familiarity of a family. Helena felt apart from them like a stranger. Valamir asked Ludimir, "You're with us today." "Thought I might." "Good." Valamir turned to Helena. "You'll have to ride the mare. Another day of carrying two won't be good for Hassan. I wish you could stay with Kratchman in the wagon, but it wouldn't be wise. My place is with the men, and by law, Kratchman is forbidden to raise a hand against any Hun. If you had tried something—" He paused. "The mare won't give you trouble. I'll hold her reins." She nodded. "I can ride." Ludimir spoke. "Valamir, I don't have command. I can stay with Kratchman. She'll be safe with me." Valamir smiled warmly at his brother. "That would be perfect." For an instant, Helena thought Ludimir looked haunted and uneasy, but the look vanished as quickly as it had come. Already busy with the horses, Valamir had seen nothing. Troubled, Helena repeated her request. "I want to ride with you, Valamir." "I'd like that," he said. The day's journey began. Sorel was frisky and impatient to be off, pulling the lead taut in Valamir's hand. The air was cold enough to see one's breath. Her hands were like ice. Helena was thankful for the warmth of her new coat. Gloves would have been a miracle. As the band answered Valamir's signal, Sorel struck off at an easy canter. Unlike Hassan, the mare's gait was smooth like a dancer's. As the horses stretched out into a gallop, Sorel wanted to run. Grateful for the saddle, Lena sat back using her weight to slow the mare. At the same time, Valamir shortened the lead. As the band continued at a gallop, Sorel ultimately tired. She stopped fighting the bit and was content to be by the road's side. Morning turned to afternoon. Occasionally the pace slowed to a trot, but never for long. On and on they traveled across the endless steppes toward the north and Attila. The camp followers and their wagons were unable to keep pace, and they had dropped back almost out of sight. The day lengthened. Helena ached from fatigue. Without any discussion, Valamir reversed their horses in the direction of Kratchman the wagon. As they galloped through the dust, Ludimir met them. From his seat on the wagon, Kratchman waved. Tied to the cart, Castiel perked up his ears and whinnied to his mare. As they approached closer, the servant frowned. "Why did you wait so long? Look at her. She's past exhaustion." Valamir turned to Ludimir. "You see? He's just like when you were small." Ludimir chuckled. "He'd put me to bed if I came home wet from the creek, even in the summer." He turned to their servant with a smile. "Kratchman, don't be such a mother. The woman's fine." "No, she's not. She's about to faint. She's not recovered from all her injuries. Help me get her in the wagon." Ludimir and Valamir looked at each other and quickly did as they were told. As Valamir lifted Helena from the mare, her ears rang. The steps seemed to be spinning slowly in a circle. She rested her head on his shoulder and suddenly was loath to be parted with him. Gently he put her in the bay of the small open wagon on top of the bed pads. Kratchman waved him away and covered her with a warm fur-lined blanket. Lena kept her eyes on Valamir. "I'm sorry." "Why?" "I wanted to keep up." His mouth twisted strangely. He shook his head. "You're not well. Kratchman knows about these things. Give yourself time. Soon you'll be laughing at day's end. I'll be back. Rest." He took his horse's reins from Ludimir. "He'll stay?" "Yes. I owe you." "I'll remember." Valamir wheeled Hassan and then urged him into a run. "He's such a show-off," Ludimir said. Helena looked at him sharply. "You're jealous." "You speak the truth, woman," he said with a shrug. His smile was twisted. "I love him, of course, but I hate him too." "You're lucky to have a family. He's good to you, Ludimir. But perhaps it was not so easy to grow up in his shadow." Ludimir was quiet. "It was hard. He's perfect, the best at everything. No one ever understands that." Covering her mouth with her hand, she yawned. "After all, he's 6 years older. Enjoy who you are, and you'll find your way. Someone you could love?" Kratchman interrupted. "Bevian, she needs to sleep. Enough of this foolishness." Undeterred, Helena continued. "I could never trust you, but someday you'll find the one for you. I thank you for protecting me." Soon her eyes closed. She dreamed. They were alone, trapped in a ravine. As if by magic, Julia appeared from behind a bin, laughing as he drew his bow. An arrow caught Kratchman in the eye, and he crumpled into the ground. His sword unsheathed and shield fixed, Ludimir charged. But Julia's blade had begun its evil song. It sliced the air, taking with it Ludimir's arm. Helena screamed as the blood gushed from his shoulder. from where his arm should have been. His face pale, the Ostrogoth held a gaping wound with his other hand. Grelia shouted exultation, his sword blood red as he rode to her. I've been waiting for you. Her scream was loud. Helena! Someone called. Helena! Her eyes opened. Theudemir was beside her, shaking her awake. You are having a nightmare. Where's Grelia? Who knows? Ahead someplace. He killed Karatapan and cut off your arm. Go back to sleep. Look, we're even close to the main camp. Grelia's a pig, but he's not mad. It's not his way. He'll complain to Attila, try to wheedle a favor out of his cousin, but between us, Attila can't stand him. He reminds him too much of his uncle Ruglava. Now go back to sleep. You're safe with me. Helena did not want a chance of further dreams. You've been kind, thank you. Theudemir scowled and looked away. You treat me like a brother. And that's what you are to me. She changed the subject. How long was I asleep? Look at the sun. It's been hours. She sat up. Do you think I could ride Pasiel? My bones ache from his bumpy wagon. Theudemir laughed. Karatapan, how about it? Helena, are you sure? Please, Karatapan. I'll have him ready in the time it takes a star to flash across the sky. Gods, Karatapan. Another poet in the family? I've had enough of Valamir's broody reflections to last a lifetime, Theudemir complained. Almost before she knew it, she was on Pasiel. Being with her old friend, her heart felt light. Can we catch up to Valamir? Theudemir pursed his mouth. Why? Don't you want to talk to me? Once again, Helena felt uncomfortable. His moods were mercurial. She was blunt. I feel safe with my husband. His cheeks turned crimson. His eyes narrowed as he looked over her shoulder. She turned, alarmed, but there was nothing. I'll take you to him, he said. Bevian, Karatapan said. I don't know if Valamir wants Attila to see her, at least not right away. Your point's well taken, Helena. We'll stay put. Then he added with mischief in his eyes. Karatapan will be our chaperone. Annoyed with him, she said nothing. From Pasiel's back, she had a better view of the crowd surrounding them. The majority were women, with a sprinkling of men. Some were driving the wagon, some were on horses, fully armed. Tried to count the lumbering carts, but gave up after 100. Wondering about Magda, Helena searched for her, was unable to see her in the crowd. Then she heard a baby cry. Her eyes misted and she thought of Mikhail. It saw was a red ball in the sky, but they continued traveling. In the distance, Helena saw campfires with smoke rising in spirals. She thought that Attila would not hesitate to announce his presence to the world. When Valamir returned at a gallop, Helena smiled, enjoying the way he sat on his horse, how his hair had become burnished gold in the setting sun. He reined Hassan to a halt. Any trouble? He asked Theudemir, but his eyes were only for Helena. Her cheeks warmed, she glanced at her hands. Gods, Valamir, why don't you better right now? How you stare? Theudemir said with reproof. Valamir studied his brother. It's catching. What? What do you mean? Just like Karatapan, you protect her. With him, she's a daughter, and you, she's found a brother. Theudemir muttered under his breath. Don't be too sure. I never am. No one bothered you? No, of course not. Good. Helena, Valamir asked, can you ride at a run? I want you to be with me when you enter the camp. Her heart pounded, reminding her to be afraid. Yes. He took Pasiel's rein. Karatapan, you'll find us with Attila. Bebian, we ride. As he took off, Sorel played out against her tether, tied to the cart. Karatapan calmed her with his voice and a strong arm. The two brothers rode side by side, with Helena to the left of Hassan. The horses' hoofs ate the ground, fast approaching the band of homecoming men. As they reached the others, Valamir and Theudemir shouted. Their voices started low and gradually rose to a masculine roar. As the horsemen took up the cry, Helena gritted her teeth. The sound was terrifying. Faster and faster, the horses flew and the earth rumbled beneath them. As they reached a large encampment, other horsemen poured out from the wide rows of tents, riding to meet them and answering them with horrific yells. As the two groups converged, they halted with only a horse length to spare. In front of Valamir, a space opened around a single horseman. He was broad, massive, except his short stature, and dressed in plain leather clothes. Except for the jingling of the horses' bridles, all was quiet. Valamir shouted, We've come! His band gave themselves a roaring accolade. We found riches, Lord Attila. The man looked at Helena intently. So I see. Valamir's voice was nonchalant. The shaman has made her my wife. Her name is Helena. Attila became still. Then he laughed. The sound was harsh. Well, who would have believed it? How many hearts did you break this year alone? How many women will cry when we get back, especially the mothers. Congratulations, old friend. May the gods make your union fruitful. Attila's brown eyes, sharp with intelligence, probed Helena and assessed her. Belaying his welcoming words. He was ugly, but despite his scarred cheeks and lank black hair, he had an uncanny magnetism radiating from within him. His features were Mongolian, as were Grilia's. Yet, Attila's face emanated strength instead of depravity. Caught by his implacable stare, Helena felt like a bird about to be swallowed whole by a snake. When Grilia pushed his horse through the crowd, drawing Attila's attention, Helena was almost relieved to see her blood enemy just to escape Attila's compelling eyes. Grilia pointed at Helena. Cousin, this woman is mine. Valamir stole her from me. Attila studied his cousin with quiet authority. Valamir has married her. Would you give her the same protection? Grilia spat in the ground. I saw her first. It doesn't matter if he married the bitch or not. You question our laws? You surprise me, Grilia. The shaman has made their marriage sacred, so either one repudiate the other, then you may come to me and ask for my decision. Until then, go in peace and find another woman. Grilia pointed to Valamir. You favor him over your own blood? But Attila's face was impassive. No, I uphold our law. Do not speak of this again. Grilia scowled. I'll see your bones rot, Valamir. Valamir laughed derisively, cursing under his breath. Grilia rode on alone to the camp. Lord Attila, if he harms my brother, I'll have my revenge, bloodkin of yours or not, Dudimir stated. Attila smiled, and that would be your right under the law. His eyes rested on Helena once more. Now, Valamir, tell me more about your new wife. She was the bird again, held in thrall by the snake's beady stare. By your leave, Attila, I'd like to see my bride settled. May I join you later? Of course, but bring her with you. We'll eat together in my quarters. You have much to tell me. As you wish, Attila, it would be an honor. I'm pleased that we understand one another. As the crowd dispersed towards the large and sprawling camp, Helena could not forget Attila's relentlessly probing eyes. So they meet Attila. And Grilia doesn't give up his obsession, as it were. So you'll see more next week, or you'll hear more next week. Chapter 14 will be next week. And if you want to follow along, you get the book on Kindle, and also as this book. So check it out. I hope to see you next week. Same time, same place. Have a good week. Take care. Oh, and we had no power last week. That stupid storm, but we're back now. Take care. Bye-bye.